welcome back to another episode of Search It Up with Sienna, the web series where I use IMDb to discover and talk about all different types of movies and TV shows, and how the people in front of and behind the camera not only make it all possible, but are somehow all interconnected. I talk directly with the talent about their backstories and experiences on and off set, and what they're up to today. On my last episode, I talked about High School Musical with writer Peter Barsacchini. David Lawrence was the composer on High School Musical, and he was also the composer on Disney's Descendants. So today, I'm going to be talking about Descendants, and I have such a cool guest joining me, fashion and costume designer and celebrity creative consultant Kara Saun, who is the costume designer on all of the Descendants movies. And I love clothes and costumes, so this is going to be so fun to talk to her. There are 3 Descendants movies so far. All of the movies follow the lives of the kids of famous Disney movie heroes and villains, and the costumes bring all of the characters to life. Kara Saun was a finalist on Season 1 of Project Runway. She went on to become the go-to costume designer behind music, dance, and fashion-driven hits, such as MTV's America's Best Dance Crew, Seasons 1 through 5, and NBC's The Sing-Off, Seasons 1 through 3. A few of the celebrities that have worn the Kara Saun label include Zendaya, Heidi Klum, Zoe Saldana, Snoop Dogg, Kevin Hart, Jamie Foxx, Mary J. Blige, Queen Latifah, Busta Rhymes, and Eddie Murphy. Kara also created the new teen and culture-driven, socially conscious lifestyle brand, the Fashion Fairy Godmother. The brand's motto is Grant One, Give One, empowering tweens, teens, and young adults to explore their many talents and use those talents for the greater good. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Kara Saun. First, what interested you in fashion design and costume design, and were you into costumes and fashion as a kid?
I was always into art as a kid. When I started out, I was just always creating something. I think the first costume I ever made was for like a kindergarten play. I was like the lead and I made my own skirt. My grandmother would tell you the story of how I sewed a pair of shorts for her, but I sewed the legs together so she couldn't get in. It was hand sewn. But I always loved art, drawing. I always really liked presentation, like creating these big presentations for school. So when I was in school, I started sketching. And then in school, we had a class called home economics. Mm-hmm. And in that class, everybody would sew. And the teacher was like, okay, everybody make a wrap skirt, but I made like a 3-piece outfit. Like and then my mom and dad bought me a sewing machine for Christmas one year. And I just started sewing like crazy. Yeah. Every day after school, I was sewing, like in school, like sewing. And then I started selling clothes to my high school friends. So I was making denim skirts. I was having fashion shows. I was actually the fashion editor for my high school.
That's so cool.
And the first big job I ever got was my high school hired me to design and make the cheerleading uniforms for the high school.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you remember what they looked like?
What's that?
Do you remember what they looked like?
Oh, of course. I have pictures I can send you. Like I was telling your representative that I have tons of pictures. So I can send you some high school pictures and pictures of the cheerleading uniform. So anything you need, I can definitely send.
Definitely.
That you can add it to your story. But oh my God, I used to do fashion shows and everything. And that's how I got into fashion design. And fashion design led me to costume design.
And I know that you were also on Project Runway. So how did you get into Project Runway?
So, oh my goodness. So I was designing in New York and I loved it. And I actually had, the one thing, because it was earlier on in my career and I really wanted to make sure people kind of saw my designs and knew who I was. So I saw it. There's a magazine called Women's Wear Daily. And in Women's Wear Daily, there's an article about this competition and you got a trip to Paris. And I was like, oh my God, I have to do that. So I entered that competition and I won. I went to Paris and my clothes were in all these different magazines and it was amazing. And so because of that first show, that I did, and winning that competition and getting in all the magazines, I started like designing for a lot of artists. Like there was Mary J. Blige, and just a lot, Eve, like a whole bunch of different artists that I would, and then a comedian that I was designing for ended up getting a television show and going to California. So that's how I got from New York to California, because I came to work on his show in costume design. So in 2004, I had already been costume designing. Things were great. I was on a hiatus. I was on a break. And I was thinking, it was just one of those times when I was thinking, okay, do I stay here in LA or do I go back to New York? I was talking to my friend and she was leaving and so much was going on. And I honestly was just praying like, God, should I stay here in LA? Should I go to New York? And someone brought me this magazine, and on in the back of the magazine, it says, are you the next Donna Karan or Calvin Klein? And no one had ever heard of Project Runway before. It was the first season. I was on the first season. I'm the OG Project Runway. And so it said, are you? I'm like, what is this? And something had told me something big was coming. I even spoke to my mom. I'm like, Mom, I feel something big's coming. I don't know what it is, but I'm getting ready. And so when I saw that on the magazine, like, are you? I'm like, this must be it. This has to be the sign that I was looking for, that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So every audition had passed. They had auditions in New York and Chicago and LA. I had missed every audition because I hadn't heard about it before. The last audition was in South Beach, Florida. I said, I have to go to South Beach, Florida. I have to go. I'm going to be on this show. No one could have told me I wasn't going to be on Project Runway. No one. So I got a ticket and I jumped a flight to Florida. And there was like 1,000 people. There were so many designers waiting to get on the show, even though no one had seen it or heard about it or anything. Everybody was there for their chance to get on Project Runway, even though no one had actually seen the show before. So I'm in line and I'm like, I'm going to get on the show. And so I saw this producer and he was going down the line with his camera and he was talking to everybody down the line. And I heard him saying, hi, my name is Rich, and I'm the producer. And so when he got to me, I was just like, oh my God, Rich, how are you? Had never met him before in my life. And so we started talking and he started laughing and he was like, you come with me. So there's, when you audition for Project Runway, there's like 4 levels before you get to the top. You get through the first, you go to the next level. You get to the second, you go to the next level. And then whoever's at the end is who they consider. He's like, you come with me. He took me and he just started filming me. And I was telling him my story about design and about New York and about all these crazy stories I had in fashion design. And he's like, you come with me. And he walked me past all those levels to the top level, to where Tim Gunn was. And he said, you sit right there. And the rest is history.
Wow, that's amazing. It shows like a first impression can do, and just like kind of being yourself and talking to him.
Yeah. You would never, and I always tell people, because I have a lot of like students and kids and I've done speeches and they always are like, what? And I said, you know what? You never know someone's response.
Yeah.
Like even how you reached out to me, you never know. Yes, no, but at least you were like, let me reach out and see. And it's so important.
Yeah. And what was the most rewarding thing about your experience on Project Runway?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm going to be so honest with you right now. Like, Project Runway is going on season 20. Like literally it was 18 years ago. Not winning Project Runway, because Jay Bird, who I love to death, was he won, and I was not winning Project Runway was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because so many things happened from that show. I mean, people came up to me like, you got robbed, Kara Saun, you got robbed. I'm like, no, I didn't get robbed. Like literally just being on the show and having that exposure, and people had never seen that show before. And we became the little like guilty pleasure for everybody. It was insane the amount of press that we got and all the things that came from it. I ended up finding an amazing investor who just invested so much in the company. We showed at Fashion Week. We sold to boutiques all over the country. A group of Hollywood folks were just like, we love you. And they had a show, like they got together and I like had a show at like Daphne Wayne's house and Nicole Murphy modeled for me. And like all these celebrities came together to be like, we believe in you. P. Diddy out of the blue just calls me and is like, Kara Saun, I saw you on the show. I thought you were amazing. Like, just like the craziest things. And so many amazing things happen. People were calling me up for work immediately. The first call I got was from a producer. There's a show called What I Like About You with Amanda Bynes and Jenny Garth. And he was like, we saw you on Project Runway and we want you to come design the show. Then I did a TLC show. I did America's Top Model for one of their ad campaigns. I was a spokesperson for a number of different companies. So it was just like, for the next 10 years, I've never had to even pop open a portfolio because people saw me on the show and they really love my work and they love my personality. And they were just like, we want to work with you. So it was just an amazing experience. It was an amazing time. I loved it. I met some really awesome people. Me and Jay were friends for a very long time. I recently reconnected with Nora from the show. If you remember Nora from Project Runway season 1, I love her to death. I reconnected with her and we've been chatting back and forth. So it was just, and I have to also say, like, we connected with a lot of kids and a lot of women and a lot of people who wanted to get in design. Like,
Yeah.
really, people were just like, honestly, like, you changed fashion. That show changed fashion. And so many people kind of wanted to get into fashion from that design. So it will always have a great place, like, in my heart for all the things that we were able to accomplish with it. And just for all the amazing things and adventures that came after.
Yeah, definitely. And now I see how many things came your way. So how did Descendants come your way?
Oh my gosh. So, like I said, after Project Runway, it was like a 10-year, just all these different shows. And the amazing thing about a lot of the shows that I did is they love my big presentation and they love my colors. So I did MTV's America's Best Dance Crew for 5 seasons. So I worked with the Jabberwockies and all these dancers. I did NBC's The Sing Off for 3 seasons. So it was singing, it was big, and it was colorful. So I had always been working on all these projects that had a lot of music and a lot of fashion and a lot of dance. And then, wouldn't you know, I did 2 Disney projects, or 3 Disney projects. I did Zapped with Zendaya. So that's one of the movies I costume designed, and they love my work with Zendaya. I did all of Zendaya's clothes. And then I did another Disney project called How to Build a Better Boy with China Anne McClain. And yeah, and so they love my work on that. So I was doing a lot of different things. And I get a call from Disney and they were just like, we have this project coming. We can't tell you what it's about. We want you to come sit in this small room, read the script. You can't take the script with you. You just have to take notes and then go and do a presentation. So I'm like, this is insane. Because usually this is how it goes. Hey, can you read this script, do a presentation, and go in? No, this was so top secret when it first came out. Like no one can say anything. So I went, I'm like, this is really interesting. So I went into the little room, I read this script, and I read Josanne and the Sarah and Josanne, the writers, like literally in the first 3 sentences of the script, I was like, I have to do this movie. It's like when I knew I had to do Project Runway, I was like, I have to do this movie. I have to do this movie. It was just so amazing. It just jumped off the page. It opened with dance. And, you know, it's funny because when they came to me, they're like, this is the first time you've done anything like this. We need somebody to come in and build this world. We have no idea what it's going to look like, what the characters should look like. We need someone like you to come in and just build the world. Like, what does this look like? How does it look? And so that's what I loved about this project, is that it was like this. It was just a clean slate. And it was for me to add the color, the icons, the fashion, like everything that you saw was something that I really had. First thing I did is I did research. I went back, I watched every Disney movie. They allowed me to go to the Disney vaults in Burbank. They have vaults of just, it's a whole campus. It's where they keep all their dolls and collections and everything. And there's a vault with just like all the original artwork and original sketches and all these amazing things. So I love research. And then, you know, in the original script, all the kids had on black leather. And I was just like, oh, I'm not doing black leather. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, it has to be color. It has to be color. It has to be bright. And so to have a project, I always wanted something super whimsical, something that would be iconic and something that would live on. I always wanted to do that. And I knew the first time I read a script that Descendants would absolutely be something that would become iconic and something that would live together forever, and something that kids would really remember. And I wanted to make sure that the costumes and everything I designed fit something that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll remember when you saw, you know, Evie or, you know, or Mal or Carlos and Jay. And I just wanted something that everybody would remember, and to create costumes that would live forever, and to see like kids do the cosplay and the costumes every year is amazing to me. I love it.
What was the process for designing Descendants? Like, did you started by reading the script, so then what came after all this research?
Yeah, so you know what came after all the research is really saying like, okay, so if you look at all the characters, how do you create? Because all they knew is like, okay, we want the teenage kids, villain kids of all these iconic parents. So it really was looking at each parent, looking at Maleficent. How would I create, you know, so something like Maleficent, they're like, okay, so every character had an icon, right? Mal had her the heart, right? She had the heart dragons, right? For her icon. So the first thing I did was I built this world for each of the characters. For Maleficent, if you look at all Mal's high collars, her high collars that I built for her, and the colors of purple and this beautiful magenta and these fire dragon breathing green, that all came from Maleficent. So I went to each character, and from each character I said, okay, what were their teenage kids look like? So it's kind of my idea to make sure every time you saw Mal or Evie, they would always be in their same color throughout the whole movie. Because I'm like, every time someone sees that kid, I want them, the audience, to know who their parent is. And the way we're going to do that is to keep them in their same colorway the whole movie. And so I ended up doing that for all the characters. So, you know, it's not just about creating the clothes. It's about, I was also the fashion consultant for Descendants. I was also the creative consultant for Descendants. And what that means is I work with Disney consumer products. I work with the doll line, and I work with the toy line. I work with production and the hair. Like I created Uma's hair. So give you an example for Uma's hair, when I found out there was going to be a China Anne McClain playing Uma, I was like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity. There had never been a Disney doll with like braids in their hair. You know what I mean? How many young girls would love to see braids in a doll's hair? That had never happened. So I go into a meeting with all the executives, and I go in like this with like turquoise braids. And they were like, Uma. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you very much. And that's how Uma got the turquoise braids in her hair. So a lot of what I did is not just the costuming. As creative consultant, I was able to create the hair, the looks for the hair. And you see this behind me? That's kind of what I would do. So what I would do is I would create a presentation. This is what I think Mal's hair should look like. This is what I think Uma's hair should look like. This is when we did, say, Audrey. It wasn't Audrey for Descendants 3. It wasn't in the script that her hair was pink and blue. That was me. I'm like, you know what? How would Audrey come back she would come back with a vengeance. Like, how would she come back to Descendants 3? So a lot of what I do is creating concepts, creating, as a creative consultant, I create concepts. As a costume designer, I create the look and build the world.
Yeah.
So when you go into fashion and when you go into design, and this is something to tell kids, there's so many things you can do. Just don't think of fashion and costume design. You can be a creative director and do what I did and kind of create the whole look for things and build worlds. You can do merchandising. There's so many things you can do. But for Descendants, I love the fact that kids all over the world were cosplaying and wearing these costumes, and really also love the message behind Descendants. And it really meant, we got letters from so many girls with the message men and how they were going. I had girls come up and hug me and like, you know what, I was going through a really hard time. And, when I watched Descendants, it really helped me a lot. And so one of the things I loved about working on Descendants is really talking to kids and hearing their stories and knowing that Descendants meant a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, it was definitely there's so many like good messages put in the movie.
Yeah.
And did you meet with each actor before you actually created the costume?
Yeah, you really, well, for me, I love to meet talent in advance. It
Yeah.
really does help to know a sense of who that person is. I know for me, I even research who that person is in their own world,
Yeah.
outside of the movie to me, because with me as a costume designer, I know for a fact that when you put something on someone that they love, like when I work with Dove and I would create something and she would put it on and love it, she would immediately turn into a princess, like in front of my eyes, like immediately. And so it's important to me to know who the talent is, to know what they love, to know what really works best for them and their bodies. And I use that. I use everything. I use everything I know about that talent to create something that I know that they'll love and I know that will look great on them. And I also know that the production and producer and director, Kenny Ortega, will love. So it's really a combination of things. But yeah, we talk, we meet, we do fittings, we do colorway, and it's also saying, okay, what colors are going to look best against your skin tone? What colors will look best with this character? What colors will look best with this? And I use all of that in creating.
And how did you present your like costume ideas, like your final costume ideas to the director and the crew?
Well, that's a big thing. I give these huge presentations. Usually it starts out with, like for Descendants, for one of my presentations, I went to this place called Voodoo Donuts, and I got all of these magical, kind of crazy donuts. And I have my own soundtrack because when I'm designing and creating for all these characters, a lot of times I create a soundtrack for each character. And when I'm working on that character, I play my soundtrack for that character. So I have this music going, and then my presentation is usually on a huge screen. And it is a presentation about colors and ideas. I mean, there are times that I even had models walk in a room. I've done it so many different ways, but I also create these big books, like hundreds of pages of books of just concepts and ideas. And this is what we can do. And these are the toys we can do. And these are the clothes we can do for different scenes, different important scenes in that movie. And so usually when I do a presentation, it's the director, it's the head of the studio, it's the vice president. But my presentations became so big, and it was used basically kind of like as a Bible, as a blueprint. And so they would have me give the same presentation to the music department and the PR and the toy company. So I became like this, show. But it really was helping to build the world. And so I would give this same presentation over and over again. The very first Disney presentation we had at a movie theater on the Disney lot. and they had hundreds of Disney employees and executives in the room, and it was up on a movie screen. And it was just me, Kenny Ortega, Dove, and the production designer, Mark Hufflane, in the front of the room, and Gary Marsh, the head of Disney at the time. And we gave this huge presentation to hundreds of people. And so that everybody would know, this is the look of the movie. So everybody can go back to your own departments and you can build on this world from what we just showed you.
Yeah, that's cool. And so did they know that Dove Cameron was gonna be Mal before?
Once we got into the presentation for that presentation, they did. I mean, it takes some time for casting, but I feel like Dove and a few of them were pretty early on, that we knew. I think Dove has her own story about how she came in a purple wig and nailed the job. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it was awesome. Once everybody was cast, everybody fit their characters so well, and the casting was awesome.
And did you have a favorite costume that you designed for a certain character?
Everybody always asks that, and I have to say there's a few costumes that I think there's a few costumes. If you saw the iconic punk looks of D2, like all the 4 villain kids, those are some of my favorite, and they were all detachable. It was all really fun. Then the iconic punk of the motorsport punk in Descendants 3, the motorsport, when they motorbikes.
Yeah.
The whole concept of the bikes was actually my concept, because I'm like, they can't go back in the limousine. I refuse. So I'm like, how about if we use these outfits and have them go back on the bikes? And they love the concept. And so that's how they ended up going on bikes for D3. And then I made these really cool motorsport punk bikes. I think you have to understand that we custom made like almost everything in the movie, especially for the villain kids. And so each costume was so detailed. I think in D3, Dove, Mal had this costume that had these wings on the back.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my favorite. The dress in D3 where she turned, she had this beautiful hand painted dragon dress, and then she turned into a dragon. That was one of my favorites. Oh my God, there's just so many. Cotillion, Coronation. There's so many that I really, what Uma's first outfit and Uma's Cotillion outfit that had like thousands of, and I just want to show like each outfit, if you see these little trinkets.
Yeah.
Like this is like headsets that I made for Mal. You see that? Like everything that I do, every piece of jewelry, all these bracelets that you've seen in the movie, these are all custom. These are all built. We buy the trinkets, we put them in, and so I have a team of artisans and a team of customizers, and we go and we get all these amazing little trinkets, and they're hand sewn and they're glued and studded onto the outfits. Look at, this is the kind of mirror bracelet.
Yeah, I remember
that. And so it's hard to say which is my favorite, because all of these pieces have been customized and handmade, and detailed and then distressed. So there's so many that I love.
The costumes kind of help define each character, like you said earlier. And how do you think the costumes evolved from Descendants 1 to Descendants 3?
That was all planned, my friend. It was all a plan. Every time I do any show, like, and this is starting from when I was doing America's Best Dance Crew, every season, you have to up your game. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, we started out with Descendants 1 and it was so much fun, but you have to build on where that character is. For Descendants 1, they were just coming over, they were just finding out who they were, right? So you could tell by their clothes, they were very much part of the aisle, very much part of the aisle. Then when you saw Descendants 2, what happened? Oh my God, these kids, it was like preppy punk. That's what I used to call it. It was preppy punk. They're like Now they're at this school, they're popular, you know, everybody knows them, they're shining. And so that's why in Descendants 2, you saw everything was like stoned, and Evie was just like designing all these amazing clothes, and everybody was so just it was just preppy punk. It was just like bedazzled and bejeweled. Everything was just on that level, because now that they're there, and it just really fit where the story was, right? The cotillion, the kids are there. I mean, remember Mal had the kind of white kind of hair with just the lavender, because they had gone so far over to the other side. They were very Oridon.
Yeah.
And then you had to bring them back to the aisle. And then it's funny because in Descendants 3, it really took not a more serious turn, but it's just like, okay, how are we going to lead this? What are we going to say? And you saw the clothes were really fit the action of what was going on in the movie and who the kids had grown up to. Now, you know, Mal's getting engaged. You know what I mean? So I really built the looks of the clothes to fit each movie, but each time we raised to a new level.
Yeah, and you can notice it too, which is
Oh, good. I'm glad. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. And did you work, can see that you definitely worked on hair a lot. So did you work closely with hair and makeup? And do you come up with the hairstyles too?
Yeah, so with hair and makeup, how it kind of started was really that whenever I design and whenever I do an illustration, I use the actual talent's face and hair. And so in my own creations, I just create the look head to toe, just normally. And so what ended up happening is the producers were always like, I love that hair. I love that hair. I love that hair. Then by 2, it was coming up with hairs that fit the looks. And what happened was, you know, I worked so closely with the hair and makeup team on a lot of these shows, and we become friends, and they really, it's really helpful. And then and I'm also the fashion consultant. So what happens is before we even start the movie, I'm already working with Disney on the look. So then it has to match as we go forward. So that's how it kind of starts. For Descendants 3, I actually hired the makeup people. Like I literally, as a consultant, they're like, you know what, want you to come in as a consultant and really help finish out the trilogy. And so for 3, it was different because I came in, I'm like, you know what, we have to find like the best hair person. We need Beyonce's hairstylist. That's who we need. And that's what I did. I interviewed a whole bunch of people. We landed on Kim Kimble. She does Beyonce, Cardi B. She's done all of these talents. I'm like, we need someone who dyes and builds beautiful wigs, beautiful hair pieces, beautiful. And Kim Kimble and her team came in, did all these beautiful hair pieces. And I literally would go and pull the colors of the hair that I wanted, the colored hair. Because you remember Mal, we found out her father was Haiti, so we had to add the blue tints. So really, remember Audrey? I said Audrey's hair in the script was brown, and I was just explaining, you know, Audrey has to come back in a big way. So that's when I created Audrey having kind of the pink and bluish hair.
Yeah, and then after we have all these like hair and costumes, while you're working on that, because there's so much dancing in all 3 of the movies, do you consider like the dancing component too?
Oh, let me tell you something. If you're working with Kenny Ortega, that is your priority. Like Kenny Ortega comes from the dance world. He was a choreographer before he became a director. And so the safety, it's not just considering, it's really is safety. You know, you have to understand, like in Descendants 2, where there's sword fighting and up on all of these things and then dancing. And then they're dancing throughout the whole thing. But you have to make sure that dancers, it's the physicality of it all. You have to make sure that the dancers can have these movements. So we have gussets. We create gussets under the arm, the sleeves. We create clothes that the dancers can dance in and can breathe in and can work in. And not just that, but the shoes. So a lot of times for the shoes, you may see Mal in heels like this, and then she has her dance shoes. You just gotta look. You know, and that's because you just always want to make sure that they're safe And it's something that's super important to Kenny Ortega, that all his dancers are safe and they have what they need. And we want that too. And for Descendants 3, I work with Jamal Sims, who is an amazing choreographer. And a lot of times it's just like sitting with the choreographer and saying, hey, what do you guys have coming? What kind of movements? I don't know if you remember the armor coming alive. Like, we designed those armor costumes, and I had a whole team just for the armor. That's all they did is the armor, because it was so important for it to look like nobody was in those armor. He wanted it to look like it came alive, right? And so, I mean, we had those specially built, and we customized them so that the dancers, it was a mix of fabric and metal, so that the dancers could really move and make it what Kenny Ortega wanted.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a huge thing to consider.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite movie out of the 3 movies?
Favorite movie out of the 3 movies. I think I'm not sure if I have a favorite. I mean, I think that, it was so exciting when they introduced Uma in Descendants 2. But then when we first started Descendants 1, and we went to Vancouver, because all the movies were filmed in Vancouver. And I remember one day on the set, someone just was like, and we were in the middle of doing like promos and the photo shoots, and someone was just like, okay, we're just going to stop right now and we're going to look at these costumes. And like, it was all the parents, it was all the talent, it was all the producers. And they just kind of gave me like honestly, like a standing ovation for the costumes. And everybody was just so happy, and we just all knew that what we were doing was going to be big.
Yeah.
It was just a great feeling. So for each and every movie, there's something that really stands out. But I know for sure that first time when we first started filming and saw the kids, and that first opening scene with the dance is really special. So for different reasons, each.
They're all kind of your favorite.
Yeah, they're all kind of my favorites. They're all my babies.
So going back to fashion design, you've designed like so many different personalities. Do you have a preference between fashion design and costume design?
I think what I love is the ability to just work on different projects that are fun to me and that mean something. Costume design allows you to go in the future, allows you to go in the past. It allows you to be in present day. And I love that. I love kind of building worlds. But then I realized with my whimsical design, I can do the same thing, with whimsical. And I really like creating kind of more whimsical things right now that are kind of fun and so and upcycled. And so I love them both, but I do love building worlds. Building worlds has just become so much fun to me.
I doing some research too, which I like to do. You have an outreach program I came across called Fashion Fairy Godmother. And can you
Yes.
tell us a bit about it, and how do you see it growing and having an impact in the future?
First of all, it's so funny because so many years ago, I started the Fashion Fairy Godmother, and it just, even before I started with Disney, I just had written it down, the Fashion Fairy Godmother. It was just on a piece of paper, like years and years and years ago. I don't know if I knew I was going to Disney, but it just so happened. And so when we really started doing the Fashion Fairy Godmother initiative, it really was I've spoken to 1,000 Girl Scouts, and where was I? Idaho, Ohio. I've spoken to the Boys and Girls Club, and I put on presentations. For the last 6 years, we've sponsored an organization called the Kids in the Spotlight, and they're a foster care organization that teaches foster care kids how to write and produce and act in their own short films. And so I've been working with them for 3 years. I work with houseless children, homeless children, and we did Halloween costumes, and I did an immersive for them and a fashion show so that they can, and it's just been so amazing to work with all these organizations. And it's not just about bringing kids fashion and bringing in, it really is about showing kids to tap into that art and tap into whatever art is for you and how you can use your art for the greater good. So it's not just about tapping into it. It's like, okay, now that you have that, what can you do for others? What can you do to help other people? So it's kind of like art and artivism together. And so there's actually some really big things coming up soon that you'll be seeing on television, actually. And so an appearance. So you will be seeing, stay tuned, because we're going to be doing some really awesome things for kids.
I'm very excited. And that's just amazing. And I've had so much fun talking to you today. But before we end, I have something I've been doing with most of my guests, and it's called my 5 rapid fire. So it's like my 5.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so bad at that, but okay, let's do it.
I have 5 questions that I'll ask you, and you just kind of say the first thing that like you think fits the answer in your head.
Okay.
First question, favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh my God, easy, coffee.
Had a superpower, what would it be?
To just be able to grant wishes.
Oh, that's
yeah.
Yeah. And then if you had a fairy godmother of your own, what would you ask her for?
Oh, wow. If I had a fashion fairy godmother of my own, I would ask her to just allow me the ability to reach more people.
That's amazing. And one piece of advice you could give to the next generation.
Oh my goodness. The piece of advice I would give to the next generation is to appreciate, please, where we are in technology, where we are in the world, and to take advantage of it, and to take advantage of this time and your talent, and never take anything for granted. Never take anything for granted. Like, with all the breath that you have in you, work towards your goal of what you want to do. Don't give up. And to just use your talents in a way that makes the world a greater place.
That's great. It's a great advice. And so my last thing, you're actually the first person I'm doing this with, and it's almost creating a story. So finish this sentence in any way you want. Once upon a time.
Once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a young girl who was very quiet in her own way. It's weird because she was quiet and popular at the same time. And she had dreams of being just a creative and a creator and a talent. And that little girl had a mother who poured everything into her and who was her biggest support, her biggest cheerleader. And she really encouraged her to go into the world and do amazing things.
And I just want to thank you so much for doing this. I had so much fun talking to you. I learned so much, and you're just
good. I'm so glad. It was so great to meet you, Sienna. Keep up the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you. You too.
Good.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you, Kara. Your experience, your energy, and your costumes are incredible. And now, before we search it up, here's a quick fun fact. Did you know that initially, Descendants was not going to be a musical until Kenny Ortega came on board to direct? It was originally written as an action-adventure comedy. And now it's time to search it up. Let's see. Oh, Dove Cameron, who plays Mal on Descendants, also played Betsy on Apple TV's series Schmigadoon. Well, see you next time to talk about Schmigadoon.